Hello, my name is Andy Schweitzer, and this is a quick little video on English and metric relationship conversions. For the most part, we are expecting you to be somewhat familiar with English and metric systems. But we've been talking about mathematical relationships, and these are just other mathematical relationships. They are very much linear relationships. For example, for let's say unit of volume. Okay, now for the unit of volume, one teaspoon, I should say 1 tablespoon, TBL, is equal to 3 teaspoons, and that's of course in the United States, but that's not everywhere. Some countries it's only 2 tablespoons, right? But in the United States, it's 3 teaspoons equals 1 tablespoon. Okay, so if I have 2 tablespoons, well, that would be equivalent to a grand total of 6 teaspoons. And if I have 3 tablespoons, well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that now we're going to have 9 teaspoons. Okay, that's what I mean by a linear relationship. But it is quite common. Okay, now for any linear relationship, we can use a factor label, or we can use a ratio. And depending on the student, you would choose one versus the other. I will be concentrating on factor label or unit analysis. I'll show a quick example of this relationship in ratios, and then you can choose to do however you want to do it. But let's say I have, for example, 15 teaspoons. Okay, and of course this is easy to say that I have 5 tablespoons. But mathematically, again, how do we calculate it? Well, x1 over y1 equals x2 over y2. My relationship is 3 to 1 teaspoons versus tablespoons, and in this case I'm looking for that I have 15 teaspoons and how many tablespoons. Cross multiply and then divide out, and x will equal 5 tablespoons. If I were to do this with factor label, again, I would start out with my 15 teaspoons, and I would use my unit analysis conversion, my ratio, which would be 3 to 1, and setting up my conversion, the teaspoon has to go on the bottom and the tablespoon has to go on top. It would be a 3 to 1 relationship. This is the relationship. This is what they give us. This is given. This is the relationship. This allows us to flip from a teaspoon to a tablespoon. It's nothing, this means nothing, without our initial amount. 15 divided by, times 1 divided by 3 is 5 tablespoons. Okay? So this is example, the only difference between English conversions and the metric conversions is the relationships themselves. Otherwise, the mathematics is entirely the same. We're given a certain value, we are given a relationship, and we've used the two to get the answer. Okay? So, just so happens that the English system relationships are much more convoluted, or I would say historical. They aren't created to make logical sense. They're just 12 inches in a foot. Well, that's something historical, okay, that people just came up with along the ways. It's been very much controlled by warring factors in Europe. One tribe takes over another tribe, and they institute some of their mathematical relationships, and so on and so forth. Just so happens that most of Europe was conquered by Napoleon, who instituted the metric system. The one country could not take would be England, and in that sense, they stuck to their own system. We had already deviated from England at that point, but either way, it is what it is. So, all historical. Now, let's do just a couple examples. I'm just going to give you some examples of these relationships. Okay, we have relationships for mass, relationships for volume, and distance. Okay, and of course, these could be gathered, online at any point, and there are lots of them. Okay, but these are common ones that I'm kind of going to expect that you have on your plate when we're doing work in this class. So mass would be, for example, you should know that there's 2,000 pounds equals 1 ton. And there's oodles of these things here. Volume, for example, and there's lots of them we'll give in class. I'm not going to give all of the volume ones. There's 1 gallon equals 4 quarts, which equals 8 pints. Okay, so there's 2 pints in a quart, and then there's, for example, 16. I'll do a bunch of them here. 16 tablespoons in a cup. All right, and then so on and so forth. 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. We'll give a bunches in class, but in some sense, just so you know which ones I'm expecting you to know. Distance-wise, all right, there's 12 inches. It equals 1 foot. 5,280 feet equals 1 mile. And for our class, if you have a note card and you're looking for some common conversions, just to have on hand, these would be some of them. There's 3 feet in a yard. Okay, so some common conversions that we might use. Okay, these are little relationship tools to learn to flip from one unit to another one. Okay? Now the metric system, again, is just a system of relationships. Relationships are ratios. And the way this system works, and again, I'm assuming you are familiar with this. So we have essentially a prefix and we have a root. Okay. The root is going to tell you the type of measurement. Okay. The main roots, and there are lots of them, anytime you're measuring something, you would have a root that would be indicating that type of measurement. For example, distance would be a meter. Volume would be a liter. Mass would be a gram. Okay. And then the prefixes tells us the magnitude of how big is it. Okay. And the prefixes are the same regardless of any of the types of measurement. Another one I might add here would be for energy, would be a joule of energy. That's something we'll use a lot as well. Now, as far as our prefixes are concerned, let's take a moment and look at our prefixes. The prefixes, and there are bigger ones and smaller ones, but we'll often use a stair-step drawing to represent all of our prefixes. Okay, and in the middle would be our base unit. Okay, which, for example, could be a meter. Okay, and they're all based off powers of 10. Okay, so there is the deci, centi, and milli. Right. And then above here is deca, hecta, and kilo. Based off powers of 10. So it's more of a system as opposed to random relationships. This is going to show us our relationships, and it's all relationships based off powers of 10. Okay. Now, for this, for example, you might say that there is, if we did meters, you'd say there's 10 meters in 1 decameter. and there's 10 decameters in 1 hectometer, and there's 10 hectometers in 1 kilometer, so on and so forth. That means that from how many meters are in 1 hectometer? Well, would be 100 meters are in 1 hectometer, and there is 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer. So base up part of 10, all we're do is multiply by 10 or add a 0 for every time you go up a step. Same thing here. Okay, milli means 1/millionth. Okay, but in this case there would be 1 meter equals 10 decis, or 100 centis, or 1,000 millis. Of course, milli means you think 1 million or 1/millionth. In that case, 1 kilo equals 1 million millimeters. Again, I'm using meters here, but you could use grams, liters. It doesn't make a difference. Joules. Okay. 1 million millimeters equals 1 kilometer. 1 million grams equals 1 kilogram. Okay. Now, of this unit, what I tend to remember is that from top to bottom is a million, and from the middle to either side, so 1,000 equals 1, or 1,000 of these guys, one of these guys equals 1,000 of these guys. So from the base middle to the end of our standard stair step is 1,000, and from the top to bottom is a million. Every time we go up and down a step, we gain or lose a 0. So, for example, if you have 1 kilogram equals how many centigrams, CG? Okay. Well, in this case, I would say, well, for my relationship, what is the relationship between the two? Well, there's 1 kilogram to all the way to the bottom would be a million milligrams. But I'm one step short, so rather than being a million, I would hack a 0 off, and it'd be 1 equals 100,000 as opposed to a million. And these are equivalent. 1 kilogram equals 100,000 centigrams. They're the same thing. They are the same. Couple examples. Okay, I will do some examples of, let's say, some English and some metric. All right. So we could take, okay, let's take, for example, 1.5 miles. And how many inches is this? Now, this sometimes gives kids problems, okay? And the way I would solve this problem is I would look at my current English units that I have available for me. And, okay, so it should be here someplace. Okay, so for distance, I got 12 feet equals 1 inch, 1 foot equals 12 inches, 5,080 feet equals 1 mile, 3 feet equals a yard. Okay, so this is what's available to me. And then I would come up with a plan. Now, once you come up with a plan of how you're going to link your conversions together, the rest of it's just manual labor. You could hire someone to do it for you. This is the thought part that takes a little ingenuity. Okay, I'm in miles, and I'm going to flip this to feet because I have a conversion for this. All right, I'm going to use 5,280 feet equals 1 mile. And then I'm going to go from feet to inches. Of course, we know that there are 12 inches in 1 foot. Okay. So these 3 conversions here. Now, well, 2 conversions. Once I have this, the rest of it is simply following directions. 1.5 miles, dot line, get rid of the miles, go to the feet. Get rid of the feet, and go to the inches. Notice my units will cancel. I have 5,280 feet equal 1 mile. I always like to put my units in first. One of the largest mistakes is inverting this, putting the large number at the bottom or up, vice versa. This is how many feet equals this miles. So 12 inches equals 1 foot. So the 12 has to go with the inches to 1 mile. And 1.5 times 5,280 divided by 1 times 12 divided by 1. And this is my answer in feet, or sorry, inches. And at this point, I don't even need to calculate this. This is something you can plug into a calculator. Again, this is what's given, and everything beyond this point is just linear relationships. These are just linear relationships that are unique to the metric system, or sorry, the English system, and you need to look at them and just link them together. Okay. Next, metric system example. Okay, let's say we have 500 grams. Okay, of something. It could be anything. Let's say 500 grams of water. Okay, how many milligrams do we have? All right. Well, what's unique about the metric system is that we don't have all these individual small complicated relationships. And again, we could say, for example, how many inches are in 1 mile. If you knew that, you could do it in one step. But because every step is different, there are innumerable, large number of varying relationships that no one knows all of them. You know, how many inches are in a mile? I don't know. I do know there is 1 mile is 5,080 feet and 1 foot is 12 inches, so I can link them together. Okay. Every step is a little different, so we need to take each individual step on its own. I often make the analogy, if you're running up a flight of steps and every step is different, you would have a hard time running up the steps because you would actually need to look at each step and take each step individually. You'd measure in your head, your eyes, and you would take each step individually. You couldn't take 4 or 5 steps at a time. But in the metric system, every step is the same. So I can take multiple steps because I know they're all the same. So in the metric system, I'm going to go from a base unit down to a milli. 1, 2, 3 steps. And again, base to an edge is 1,000. So there's 1,000 smaller millis equal 1 bigger meter or base unit. I think we're using, in this situation, we're using grams. Okay. Now, these are small. These are big. Keep in mind, it takes a lots of small things to equal one big thing. Okay, that's something that people tend to mess up. So in this case, I would go 500 grams. That's what I actually have. I'm going to use a relationship of grams to milligrams. 1 bigger gram equals 1,000 smaller milligrams. 500 times 1,000 is 500,000 milligrams. Must show work. Finally, just a quick little note here. There are some relationships that can link you from the English world, and I'm going to type this in here, is the English to metric relationships. All right, so for example, and there are lots of them. These are just ones that we are going to just have on our plate ready to go. The English world to the metric world. I often refer to this as kind of like a little bridge from one to the other one. 2.54 centimeters equals 1 inch. And 3.78 liters equals 1 gallon. 2.2 pounds equals 1 kilogram. Okay. 4.18 joules equals 1 calorie. These are all of our conversion links. Okay. Just a quick example of how this might work is, myself some room here. If I wanted to do a conversion, let's say between English and metric, okay. Let's say a person weighs 200 pounds, and they want to know, okay, how many milligrams does this person weigh? Well, first of all, before I even start this math, I'd realize how big a pound is, and how much a milligram weighs, and I would expect this to be a big number of milligrams. A milligram is quite small. All right, so I'm going to go from pounds to milligrams. I'm going to use the bridge right here. Okay. So first of all, I got to get to the bridge, cross it, and then use my relationships to get to the bridge, and then use this relationship to cross the bridge, and then use my relationships of the metric system to get to milligrams. So I'm going to go from pounds, and I happen to be at the bridge, okay, and I'll use pounds, cross the bridge to kilograms, and then cross the bridge, the relationships to milligrams. So 200 pounds, dot line, get rid of pounds, go to kilograms. Get rid of kilograms and go to milligrams. The relationship here is 2.2 pounds is 1 kilogram, and then 1 kilogram is equal to 1 million milligrams. And I would simply divide and multiply, and I would be in milligrams. Should be a big number. We could do this with just about anything. If you're given an English unit, look for your relationship, convert your unit to your bridge relationship, cross over, and then convert to what you want to end in. All of this should be followed up with plenty of practice to make sure you are completely solid on how it works. That will be accomplished in class.